I guess what I'm trying to say is I've had a good life. I've had a good upbringing. I'm happy about, well, no, wait, let me back up. I'm sad that my son doesn't know what I've gone through to try to get to him. Now, that's with many obstacles. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania decided to insert themselves into my life early on in 2007, the same year that Diane Ellis Marsalis made her introduction to me as a godmother. I'm learning this after the fact. At the time, I wasn't sure. Diane inserted herself into my life, protecting Tess Sola, the mother of my son. In 2007, not only did the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, let me make sure this is clear, my son's mom tried to kill my son. And she has been playing this catch me if you can kind of thing for 20 years now. The thing is, I caught her in 2007, officially, finally, and on the record. And it took me that long because my son was stolen from me 6 times over 20 years. And that I can put on paper. It's already there. It's a done deal. That's not even a question. 6 times my son has been stolen from me by his mother over 20 years. That was a first offense. The second one was my son's almost death. I had a right to know, as a parent, that when I found out 4 or 5 years later with Matt Renner, who that's a whole nother story, we found out that my son almost died. And I found it out by pulling his records from his pediatrician to put together the thread of needle of the abuse that's happened. So in 2007, when I find out that my son was stolen from me probably 3 times by 2007, by her, not by my choice. She doesn't know how to tell the truth, and when I found out about this paper, it scared the living shit out of me, because I know he was having problems in school. He got kicked out of his first daycare, home daycare, and he was only 2 years old. My son was so bad. Now, she stole him from me in 2003, the same time we signed physical legal joint custody. And after that, he sustained a life-threatening concussion, according to the pediatrician's records, because I had to thread all this together. For 20 years, I've been documenting the life of a psychopath. For 20 years. My name is Marky Dell. I'm a below average civilian, human, but above average in many things. Prior to me having a son with this woman, I've had a strong faith in God. And that faith began early in my life. And she didn't know that. She doesn't know about my faith and my persistence and my background in serving and learning about God early on in my life. Early on in my life, I learned that God is good. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. This is the light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This is the light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I'm going to let it shine, I'm going to let it shine, I'm going to let it shine. I've been shining my light to people who tried to hurt me. all my life. Women who intentionally try to hurt other people and get away with it. Now, I'm not one who holds, let's just say, anger, vengeance, or any of those things. I hold forgiveness in my heart. I love everybody. I forgive like Jesus forgives. I've had my son stolen from me 6 times, and I forgive the woman. I've had my son near death, and I've forgiven the woman. And she doesn't want forgiveness, but she wants to not talk about it. And here's the issue. When he almost died, she hid that from me. I'm the father. I'm the other party in this life. From the jump, I've been treated like I have no I've been treated like I have zero interest in the sperm that I produced in order to make that child. Now, why do I say it like that? I say it like that because for 20 years, I've been treated in the way that I'm just a sperm donor. And for 20 years, the child I thought that I signed for in the hospital, and they said he's mine, and I didn't think I needed a DNA test, but, you know, looking back, hindsight, for 20 years, my life's on the line now because certain things never happened for my son in his life. Now, that's not out of my problem. I've been the one cheerleading my son's victories all his life and trying to come inside when she does things that are nefarious to him, meaning aka trying to kill him, and she doesn't call 911, and then she makes a mysterious report to a pediatrician. Instead of calling 911 or rushing my kid to the hospital, he's laying down on the ground, and he threw up, his breathing, he hit his head so hard, he smashed his head against something so hard that he went limp. His body went from being active to hitting his head to being on the ground. Where was she? There was no police report. There was no 911 phone call. There was no medical report of a CAT scan that was done for my kid. There was no post care for him. We don't know about his vitals. We don't know how much hemorrhaging happened in his head, because when the brain hits the head, so the brain expands, and that's when it bleeds, and that's when the pressure goes on the brain. And the little 16, he was 16 months old when this 18, and one at 18 too, there's 2 of them. The little brain hits whatever it hits, smacks, and then the brain hits the skull in such a way inside that it, so this is the brain, it goes in and it hits, or vibrates. So the child's in motion, it goes, and in the wiggling inside of the brain, what little space is there, the little brain hip, my boy, it smashes against the side of the skull in such a clamor, okay? And then you know, everybody's familiar with what happens, you know, there's the vibration afterwards. So the little brain hit, and there's a vibration between the brain, and here's the little brain going back and forth, wiggling, as it absorbs the pressure of the brain hitting so hard to the ground, or wherever it hit. We don't know. There's no report. I've never heard. I never knew about this until I found out in 2007 by a report, because she never told me, and she had a legal responsibility. When it was in writing, I had joint physical legal custody. She severed my rights right there. She severed his rights to care, and that's what hurts. I could care less about me knowing that he almost died, as much as I care about the care that should have happened at that time. And that's my issue right now. That's where I'm at in this limbo of life. because of what was done at that moment, is what I'm judged for, because I'm legally his father. And he did not get that care that day. That's what I care about. I could care less about who she talked to. What I'm concerned about at that time, when his skull hit, what did she do? She's on the clock to repair my kid. Our kid. I keep saying my kid because for 20 years he has not been my kid in her eyes. And she's his, and she spent 20 years saying that. And I can prove that. That's not a question in my mind when I say those things. Now, from my point of view, I'm his father. I have a right to get him treated. Legal responsibility to know was put on her. And that doctor never called me. She never told me. She probably told the doctor she'll tell me. She never did. Doctor thinking that she gonna do that, and she gonna get that kid care. I had legal responsibility. I had human responsibility to have known my kid suffered. And he hit the ground and he threw up and his eyes rolled back of his head and he vomited and he went limp. That's what I read from this paper. Where's the paper? It's in my car. I can put it up. I have it. It's been shown. The police have it. The doctor has it. For 20 years, yeah, my child has not been seen for his care. Now, what I mean by seen is he was seen by a pediatrician, which is weird because for the past, since I found out in 2007, I've surveyed over 400 people working in the service industry. I was able to have customers asking this following question, and I would ask them directly just like this. Hey guys, I can answer a question for me. This is exactly how I would say it. If you were a parent, I would ask parents and no parents. I didn't discriminate. I asked black, white, Puerto Rican, gay, straight, you name it, men, women, it didn't matter. If I found the opportunity in the past 20 years to ask somebody the following question, now I've learned how to ask this question in such a way, but it took me a long time. The first 200 people that I asked to settle this argument for me, this is how I asked them. If you were in care of an infant child, let's say 16 months old, what would you do if you found that child on the floor, passed out? All of a sudden he's playing, or she's playing. They're having a good time. They're up, they're alive, they're alert, they're talking, they're speaking, they're crying, they're wet, they're dry. They need feeding, they need changing, they need dressing, they need all of these things. If all of a sudden you hear your kid, 16 months old, playing around, and then you hear a thud, and then you hear silence. What were you doing? What was going on? What was going on at the time? What was being done that was so much focus that the child A fell? How about that? No police report, no 911 phone call. The ambulance was never there. The police were never there. This was the beginning of a cover-up, according to the paperwork. Not me. How was it a cover-up? A, I didn't know about it until 2007. I pull this report and I look at it, and at first it's like I cried. I literally cried. I sat at the kitchen table with Matt in the same room, and I'm looking through these documents, preparing for court, because I'm like, why am I having to prepare for court? This woman, she never did for those 5 years, 4 years, whatever, 2003 to 2007. She fucked up my kid big time. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, parentally. She wreaked havoc in my son's life. She was wreaking havoc in his life, and he was showing it by all of these different things that was going on in his life. He wasn't able to focus. She let the child do whatever he wanted to do. She thought that this child was born with this ability to know what the fuck he's supposed to be doing. Parents, kid, it doesn't work like that. My son was born empty, a clean slate. He had nothing. He was born almost perfect, but he was in the NIC unit for a week after because of her body trauma. But in his brain, he was born with zero hard drive information. Everything was loaded on there as he went on. And the child showed a physical disturbance towards Pet Dander, her dog, and dust mites. He was allergic to. I found out 10 years later that he was mismedicated for the first 10 years of his life because of mismanaging his allergies that she never took upon herself to deal with. He suffered medically, physically. He was transcribed antibiotics for the first 10 years of his life, and all he needed was Claritin. So every regimen of antibiotics was getting into his body early on in his life, and then over-the-counter medication, and the sleep medication, then the coughing medication, and the sneezing medication, and then the coughing, sneezing, aching stuff he had. This kid was medicated, overly medicated, and not the right way. Until I discovered, and I took him to get an allergy test, and I found out that what had just happened for 10 years was wrong. He was allergic to her dog that she needed to have. So this child from jump, allergic to her dog, acts up because his little body with the allergies is he's struggling every day. You know, it's like it's agitating him, and his body's reacting to that. So she takes him to the doctor and gets him antibiotics for the first 10 years of his life. Never once did anybody suggest an allergy test. I'm the first one who did it 10 years later. This woman didn't learn how to manage my son and learn how to take care of him. When your child falls on the floor and you're almost dead, you call 911. Out of 400 people I surveyed, number one answer on the board, you call 911. 400, hundreds of people I have spoken to about this neglect and this child abuse since 2007. That didn't stop me. That didn't stop me from trying to figure out how to help my son. The thing is in 2007, I called child services. From 2003, when we separated and we signed joint physical legal custody that I paid for, from jump, she stole him. She went from signing her name legally, declaring that we were going to have joint physical legal custody that I paid for from my lawyer, my attorney, went forth when we separated. I'm going to make sure and firm that I'm going to be in this child's life. And from jump, she says, "Fuck you." It's on paper, and Dr. Mitzer can vouch for that. She decided what life was going to be like for my kid. She literally signed, "We're going to do joint." I talked her into it. I said, "I'll pay for it. We're going to do this document. We're going." And she said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." She signed that paper. From jump, she left. Now, how am I supposed to deal with that? Here I am making $100,000 a year in my own business, that I began with nothing in my pocket, and I fought for it. Within 7 years, I'm making $100,000 a year. Now, for most people, that would be satisfactory, to know that your man of your child, your baby daddy, is making 6 figures a year. Don't care about the money. Where was I at in 2000? When that happened, she kicked me out. In 2003, she kicked me out of her. Okay, let me back up. When I met her, I was in my own business, my second of 2 businesses, or 3 businesses. First business I owned was Dish by Design with my brother Jack. We began this business together, and we had all intentions of working together because my brother wanted to work with me. My brother wanted me in his life. So I was doing drains with him first. When I first met him when I was 21 years old and got saved and baptized. Learned about the plumbing industry, learned about the electrical industry, and I learned about God. I read the Bible 3 times. I prayed, I fasted for up to 30 days. Up until the time I met her, I was involved with the church. I was involved with people's lives. I spent almost 10 years serving in Calvary Chapel of Philadelphia in many ministries, from child care, from 3 years on up to senior high. I spent time in all of the levels of different ages of kids. I have a very long background of being adolescent children and in that field. And I've trained people in every job I've always been in my whole life. Before I even had a child, I learned how to train people to do their job. I'd get hired by a company. I'd be so good at it that they would ask me to train the next person that comes in. This happened for me in every mother and job I've ever been in. And I've had lots of jobs before I even had my child, and even after my child. I'm not good. Working with kids first, learning how kids develop, then I took that and moved that into my workforce. All my employers loved having me work because I would go in there and take a new guy and say, "You're new, I'm gonna get you trained." And guess what? They trusted me enough. Every single job I've been to do that. It started out with kids first. When I was 21 years old, I was single. I was straight. I don't know why I'm saying that. That doesn't have any relevance. That's not wholly true. I was 21 years old when I got saved, when I met my brother, and he had his business in Langhorne I met my half-brother when I was 21 years old, who I love. I love him, I love his family, I love his wife, his kids, I love my sister Colleen and Dave and their kids, Stephanie and David. Eventually my niece, my first friend who had a kid was Trisha Luco, when she got pregnant out of high school. So I have a picture of me and him. It was important to me. I've always been sort of a protector ever since I went through what I went through as a child. So, Whitney Houston came up with a song, "Teach the Children." I believe the children are the future. Let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. Make it easier. You know the song. The children are our future. Children are God's kids. They're on loan. They're people. Kids are human. Kids have feelings. So do humans. So do I. So do you. So these little adult children that are going to be up there doing their thing in life, I got to be a part of so many people's lives. I've been blessed to be a champion for people my whole life. championing for my friend, my neighbor, the guy I never met, the girl I never met, the family I never met, the people I've never met. I've been loving people my whole life. And it feels really good to say, because being kind is free. Loving people is free. Showing gratitude is free. Being appreciative is free. Showing humility is free. Being kind, forgiving your enemies is free. And it's godlike. Okay, what does anything have to do with this? What, you have to know who I was when I was 21 years old. When I became a born-again Christian. I got Jesus in my life and He forgave me for my sins. I was 21. I spent my 20s, instead of partying, I spent reading the Bible. In my 20s, I served God in church. I served Calvary Chapel. I served Christ. I served the flock. I was involved with the church. They let me sell these hats I wanted to make with the rhinestones and the dove, and I tried selling them. And I'm involved. I did the tape ministry. I did the singles ministry. I did the orphans ministry. I've helped the widows. I don't want to name all of these things, but I guess what you have to do these days is kind of give people your background, but I feel weird talking about my service to God in this way, because I don't like to talk about it and boast about it. It's just something I did, but now I have to talk about it because somebody well, anyways, my history is clean, and I worked with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit number 22 with Tom Nolan. I was approved by the county back in my 20s, approved by the county and the state to work with children. I was working with an after-school program for homeless kids in George Washington Motor Lodge over in Trevose, where I was staying when I was homeless, when I was in my 20s. After my brother asked me to leave. My sister-in-law, sorry, not my brother. Spent my 20s. I was at George Washington Motor Lodge, staying there until I figured out another place to live. And these kids were coming home from school, and they live in a hotel, kind of like what I'm doing right now. And these kids don't know why they're there, or what they're doing, or what's going on, or what led them there, or where they're going after there. So as I was there, things happened for a reason. I saw this bus dropping off these kids, and I don't know, man, having nieces and nephews and loving kids, somehow I got sucked into working, being employed after spending time at this after-school program, volunteering. I was just volunteering. I had time. I was there. It worked out. It was fine. I didn't have to change anything special. And after, my life of service at church also corresponded with what I was doing with Tom Nolan in the after-school program, being employed by Bucks County Intermediate Unit to work with them for this after-school program. And I clearly just wanted to volunteer, but Tom said, "Hey, listen, you're here anyway, let's get you paid." Tom, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I filled out the paperwork and passed my background check, and I was employed by the Bucks County Intermediate Unit to work with these kids at an after-school program in my capacity. And I was serving now publicly on the books by Bucks County. I wasn't looking to get paid. I told Tom that. I'm glad to give from my heart. I'm glad to give to these kids. I have time. I love teaching, and it was a blessing. So I did that until I don't know what happened, but I was there. I got a few paychecks, and I guess I took off, I don't know if the program ended, or I'm not sure exactly what happened. But there I was in my 20s. Oh, at the same time I was at the George Washington, I was also working in the food pantry. You give out food to the homeless. So I'd help the churches offload the food into this pantry that we had at George Washington Motor Lodge. I ended up serving people there at George Washington Motor Lodge as I'm still there homeless. I'm there without a permanent home. I'm in between homes, if you will. And this 20-year-old something guy is at the hotel, and he's homeless too, but he's helping somebody else. I'm helping. I don't mean to, I hate talking about it because I love it. I never wanted to speak about, my life of service, because it's something between myself and God. So Tess Sola, the county never knew any of this. Well, they knew they pulled my record. They have that Bucks County. But at the time, that was before Tess Sola entered the picture. I later on become a certified foster parent with Bucks County, going through all the places and learning how to do that system too. But that was around the same time she stole him, or the third time she stole him, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania targeted me after that by marking my record out that I'm some sort of mentally disturbed person, and that's where my record began. So, anyways, backtracking to George Washington, I was heavily involved with the church in the different ministries. Like I said, I did tape ministry there, where they lend out tapes and they return them. Video, I don't think video was there yet. This was Calvary Chapel, was anywhere in Brussels and Avenue when the Calvary Chapel was in the mall. When I first met my brother and sister-in-law, and my niece and nephews, became an instant uncle. Greatest day of my life, becoming an instant uncle to those beautiful kids. That's why I left New Jersey. I was in Galloway Township when I was 21, living with my mom and my sister. I had a sugar mama back then. She was treating me nice. She'd buy me everything. Betty, I wish you the best. She took care of my car. She paid for my car insurance. She tinted my windows. She, I think I'm asking Ms. Williams. Paid for my college. Paid for my car payments. We were going to get a business together. She trusted me, and she believed in me enough. She met me working at Two Brothers, where I was working at the time before I moved up to Pennsylvania. I was working at a pizzeria. It's called Two Brothers in Pomona. And Betty, I had nothing else going on. Actually, that's not true. I was going to school to be a blackjack dealer, and I was going to go to casinos. I found out you need like 5 or 6 games, but I could only afford to do the one at a time. So after being blackjack didn't work out because I wasn't able to go get all the other games, I was defeated. And I'm not defeated, but I realized that the casinos is not what I want to do. I don't want to take money from people. I don't want to be that outlet that people that lives are changed in a negative way because of me taking money from them. I couldn't do that. My heart just, and that was when I was 21, before I was saved. I was fresh out of high school, and the only industry around that area as a young turner was a service I tried getting into. I tried getting in the Army first, and because of my hypoglycemia, they didn't take me. And then after that, I tried the Air Force, and they didn't take me. I tried serving our government, our armed forces, early on in my life, because I was a Cub Scout, because I was kind of like, it's great, serving my country. But what's great about what I learned is that this country had a standard back then, and it was a Pledge of Allegiance, and you learn early on in life. We learned. We learned. We had a very early. I had a very early on. Was brainwashed into believing in the American dream and cause, Uncle Sam. Serving your country, things of that nature. Uncle Sam We Want You poster was on my school walls. Every morning we get to school, we say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. You know, we do that every morning. Serving my country through the Cub Scouts, learning different trades, learning different things to aspire to was something I learned early on. It was great to learn all of these different things from Cub Scouts and in the camps, and then all of these experiences before I was 21 years old. Winning a kite flying contest. Kite, K-I-T-K-Y-T-K-I-T-E, you know, the thing that goes up in the air and you won a kite flying contest. I competed swimming before I was 21. For the Jewish Community Center, I was involved in going and competing for our team. We were the Sharks. I was probably about 250 pounds, fat, overweight, ugly, getting the puberty set off my body like a something that my hormones happened, and my, you know, still being a single, you know, not having a father in my life permanently or man in my life, I never sat around. I was always busy, always working one job, two jobs. I learned that early on in life. Early on in life, I learned how to work hard and play hard. And work hard meaning I was grinding early on in my life. I was cleaning police house when I was 10 years old. Our neighbors. I had life of service with the Cub Scouts. On my honor, I'll do my duty to God and my country to help other people. The Cub Scout creed, the promise, and that way of life was the onset of my life of service. Learning many things with the troops, being inside with the Cub Master, and having that hierarchy. You know, then you learn the hierarchy once you go into school. You know, there's the principal, then there's a vice principal, then there's the guidance counselors, and there's the teachers, and you learn the hierarchy, you know, through life. And then, my education was very important to my mom. She spent time with me making sure my homework was done. We get to learn a lot together. We were learning together from early on, and that just set the stage of my whole life. Being blessed like that, she cared enough to spend the time that I needed to learn what I needed to learn. But I was rebellious, so too. I was very, very rebellious. I did not like authority. I challenged authority right from the jump because of a situation that happened. That made me question authority. That's not a bad thing. I was very, very, as a child, I was very traumatized by lots of different things, but that molded me into a better person. It helped me be humble. It helped me love people. It helped me understand the methods of a woman who has a label of there was two mental labels labeled to my mother. I choose not to talk about that because that's not my focus. There was one, definitely. I mean, there was definitely one, maybe two, that there was a clinical diagnosis, and when I was 6, 7, first grade, that she had to deal with. So I learned early on about mental health. I learned very early on about how to deal with somebody who has mental health problems. I learned how to help deal with a woman, and a woman helped me deal with it too. I mean, the woman has, my mother, had to learn in real time how to take care of 2 kids, get a job, get a house, and make it happen. And I was there with her when she learned. Because no one showed her. When she left my dad when I was In first grade, I went to 3 first grades. In first grade, I was in Florida, Pinellas Park near Tampa, St. Pete. And then after we left my dad. I started first grade up in Pendle at Tawanda, and that's when I saw my brother Jack. And then never seen him again until I was 21. In the same year, went from Tawanda. My grandfather came up from Pleasantville, came got us kids, loaded the car up. When he found out my mom was living up there, put her in the car, and then we left up there. We left Pendle, and she came down to Cardiff. Without my dad. All that were done without my dad. My mom, 2 kids, and we got on the bus from Florida when I was in first grade and left Florida. Instead of moving around the corner close to where my friends were, or the teacher that wedding I was in, or the support system she had there, she got up on the bus and left, packed all the stuff up and moved. Now, some say that my mom was preparing for that. I'm not here to discuss that. I learned, while she learned how to be compassionate, I learned to have understanding about your authoritarian. That a very confusing time for my mom negotiating the kids, the work, the place of location, the reason for leaving Florida, where she's going to, all that stuff. That became a lot. So it was over more than she could bear. She went away for 14 days in intensive inpatient care, and for that time I was with my aunt and uncle, who never took any of us seriously. My Aunt Babe and Uncle Bob. And when she come out, we had a place to live, and it was just me, my sister, my mom. No dad, no relatives. My mom said, "Fuck it, I'm going to go out and do this," and she did it. My grandfather passed away in 1980. My aunt never had anything to do with us. She was in her own world. She knew what happened to me, but she didn't do anything about it. Nobody took what happened to me seriously, which is fine. But what I learned shortly after we moved to Woodcrest Apartments, after her stay, or before, or maybe it was her stay, I'm not really sure. When she beat me, she went away? Or was that before she went away, or after she went away? I think it might have been before she, I don't know. That times in my life is kind of unsure. I never asked. Either way, my mom went away. Maybe she'd come back. And she was supposed to be on medication. Supposedly. I didn't know this back then. I'm hearing this. Anyways, my mom goes through what she went through. Us kids were at my aunt's. My aunt put us in diapers because we were older kids. I was in first grade, and apparently I peed the bed. So my aunt, in her true fashion, decides to put embarrass the shit out of a first grader and puts me in a diaper because I never learned how to, so I wouldn't pee on her floor. It would be absorbed by the cloth diaper, not the plastic ones like today. The pins and everything. We stayed with my aunt for 2 weeks. I went to school. I don't know if it was in the summertime when it was, but my mom come out and she said, "I'm gonna do this." And she did. And we both learned how to heal from something very minor. I was beaten so badly on my legs I didn't know what was going to happen. I felt the pain of the beating that I took for well into like almost 10 years of pain in the front of my shins from being beaten with a baton, a metal rod, and never looked back. I never looked back. It was something that happened then, and I moved on to it. How do I know this? Because my mom showed me love. My mom took me to Cub Scouts. My mom put me into summer camps. She put me into baseball. She put me into, there was a time I was on the runway modeling as a child. I have pictures of that. She signed me up for the rodeo. She put me in swimming. She put me in the camps too. I went to Camp Arthur Rita when I was like 8 years old, and a day camp until I was able to do an overnight camp. And through those camps, I learned so many different activities: archery, riding, go-karts, and I acquired my basic rescue and water safety classes. Training. Basic rescue and water safety. My swimmer's badge. I learned how to compete. Like I slowly progressed in all of these different avenues that made me successful. That I ended up winning. For the JCC team trophies. I got trophies, and I got all kinds of awards for my swimming and winning and competing. So I learned early on how to fight. I learned early on. I did karate. She put me in karate for a while. She put me in wrestling for a while. I got my yellow belt in karate. I did the wrestling for a while, and also she put me into cooking classes and did workshops. I built a. She had one of the neighbors take me into this woodshed and build a bird cage at that same, in that same time after. My mom met a man, his name was Art. He abused me, but in the meantime, Art was learning theater, and he was taking us to the theater. I learned about Guys and Dolls and Fiddler on the Roof, and I was educated, in that small little mind up until 10 years old. Now we're talking about this. This is all before 10 years old. Did it in the Cub Scouts, doing the band thing, the music instruments. I learned about in the Cub Scouts, and I'm learning how to swim, run, be active, and I'm gaining weight at the same time. The outward of that beating made me more of an internal kind of person who's really who's not a wallflower, who spent his life behind the scenes, who should have really been the showcase flower. But that's the beauty of my background. Thinking that you're one way when you're really another. It's fun. But my training with my mom was a force. Learning how to hold a rifle and shoot it. Learning how to horseback ride. I have a natural gift with animals. My horseback riding started when I was young, around that same time, 10, 11, 12, 13. Handling horses, how to deal with them. I loved riding anything that I could start. I would ride tractors, go-karts, dirt bikes, quads, three-wheelers, dirt bikes, mopeds, being hit by a car when I was driving my moped, going to band practice in the summertime. I still live to tell about it. I didn't get many bumps and bruises. Experiencing life at such a young age, going to these plays, sitting through that, as painful as it was as a child, we didn't have TV. This was pre-internet. We didn't have cable. Didn't happen until, for me, it was like 1981, I think. There was no such thing as cable. There was no such thing as internet. There was no such thing as caller ID. There was no such thing as cell phone. There was no such thing as a pager. I grew up in a different time. And we were poor. And we would live in, I remember our Christmases being a box of pencils that said the E. Dells on it, my last name. And like this top that my mom really couldn't afford. This top, that wooden top that you swirl the little string into, and you twirl it up and you pull it, and the top falls out and it goes on the ground and spins. I mean, there was no Atari, there was no internet, there was no downloading games, this was pre-Nintendo, pre-Atari. Life was simple. It was me, and I had to protect two girls, and be protected by two girls, and then be beaten by two girls, and then be fought with two girls, and then just growing up with it was very volatile in my mom's house growing up, and I learned the opposite, and I applied it to my life with my son. But striving to do better was always something. I always had to do better. I struggled in high school, and I wasn't the best academic student by any means, but I learned everything I didn't learn in school afterwards. I learned to investigate major amounts of information and I investigated my son's abuse, tracked it from its inception to where we're at today, and who's involved, and how the county works, and how the state works, and how the government works. I've learned how to track that through my life. So my son got a dad. He didn't know this, but that was very, very smart, who chose to not use his words, but to observe life and people, and learned how to love and forgive early on in his life. My son and his mother, she's the beneficiary of a man who wants to forgive and love his son. I love my son like God loves me, and like the Father loves Jesus. And you see where I'm going, that I love my son, I love his mother, I love humans. I've forgiven a woman who abused my kid, but wanted to get away with it and wanted to turn it against me. How do I forgive somebody who's arbitrarily lying for 20 years about me? And I have a case, I want to talk about that, but like, for example, my 10 years or 9 years or 8 years in Calvary Chapel, that was benefiting other people's lives. I was helping, I would babysit for parents for free, so that the parents could get date night, and they wanted to rekindle their relationship. My babysitting became more specific. I was asked through the church and different people when they would find out what I was doing. But on my free time between work and in my 20s, there were a few families that I would rotate on occasion whenever they needed, that I would be the babysitter and call upon me. Because of my, I learned about the child care from Calvary, so as I was being a part of helping, giving back, and my blessings and my growth and my walk through Christ, giving back was something I wanted to do, and I did that by helping in all of these different areas, not just kids in church. I did the widows ministry, and did the Tate ministry, and I did security ministry, and I helped with the new building facility, and ushering things, and I was in the singles ministry, and we did outreaches like to the orphanages and things like that. I was already in my 20s in this giving like mode, which I was loving giving back and sharing my love of God with other people. Is that a crime? Does that sound like it's a child molester, like my son's mom swears that I am? I mean, she's the one with the mental issue, not me. I purely gave out of my heart with no hoping never to discuss these things ever, and especially on video. Because it robs God from His word. I don't want to talk about this, but I haven't talked about it because of the situation that I'm in. So my pureness and giving to God and the giving to these families who wanted to date night and wanted to do their thing, and doing that for free. There were the Bokers who had 5 kids. There were the McCalls who had 5 kids. There was the Comptons who had 2 kids. There was the Bokers. I said Bokers already. There was the Forts who had 5 or 6 kids, 2 of which were foster care and 1 was temporary. 2 were real, and then was it 2 that were 3? And it's Sammy. They had foster kids, and that's where I learned about the foster care program. This one was from my son's godfather, Ray Forth, they had me called upon, asked me to watch their kids. So this was going on for, slowly would progress. And all these different people that they would ask me, oh, my nieces and nephews, my brother and my sister, I'd watch your kids, my sister's kids. And then eventually my half-sister's kid, Colleen, but then my sister had kids, and then I would be with her with their kids. So there was this progression through my 20s of early childhood development. I was learning from Calvary Chapel and being, at this, instead of dropping kids off that were mine, I would watch kids that weren't mine. Maybe a little bit weird, but I guess in today's world it may be a little bit weird, but back then when I was 21 and had nothing else living for, I gave myself to Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. I asked to be forgiven for my sins, and I was baptized, and I was blessed upon more than I could have ever thought. I'm so blessed in my life. I wish I can show a picture of the happiness that I wish I could paint a picture of how happy and content I am with my walk with Christ since I gave my life over. I wish I could show. I guess the only way I can do is pull my Bible out and look at the words and look, just spreading, just scrolling through my Bible and just showing people that, God's good. But the way I lived my life was a service towards others and others-centered, not me so much centered. Because, there's lots of scripture that talks about different things of giving or whatnot, but when you give, you don't expect anything in return. When you don't expect anything in return. So that was my giving heart for, the first 20 years of my life, 30 years of my life, if you want to think about it. Because if I met my brother and got saved when I was 21, I was almost 30, so that was almost 30 years of service. Not 30 years, but by the time I met Tess, she was 36, I was 31 when we had Josh, when he was born. So, I was getting ready for Y2K. We were preparing for, year 2000 was a big thing back then, before the year 2000. We were prepping for, a massive scare. We were, it was told to us that the computer's going to go down, things are going to get rough, we got to prepare. They said, well, electric could go, they gave me all these different scenarios. So like the pandemic, we prepared for that and lived through Y2K, came and went, and what a big bomb that was. to what we were told the potential of what could happen, because the unknown, year 2000, click. We lived through, Desert Storm. I lived through Desert Storm in '96, went to Blizzard '96. I lived through 9/11, lived through many, many times of civil unrest throughout this world, the fighting that's going on. Lived through many presidents. Why am I talking about that part? I don't know why I'm talking about presidents. I've seen a lot of change. I've seen a lot in this world. I'm 52 years old now, and I've never stayed like in a single path, if you will. Most Americans here, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this whole thing, but I guess the train of thought I was in is most people in their lives, they get on a path. They're shown the ASVAB thing in school, and they get to pick up the job they want to be at. They're given a menu of life, and they take it. I tried to get into the service early on in my life. After when I was 21 years old, or 18 years old, I tried joining the service. That didn't pan out to me. Tried to go in the casinos. It's not my heart. I can't take from people. I don't want to take nothing that's not mine. I had that idealism at 18. I can't accept taking these people money and knowing that they're going to put themselves in the harm's way, mortgaging their houses, throwing up their car for collateral to win hands of cards is not where my heart is. I paid for blackjack. I never went to blackjack. I never followed through with it. I never got my other licenses. In Atlantic City, Atlantic County, in that time, in that era, in that where I grew up, in the Pinelands, you didn't have many options. Casinos, airport, or working on the boardwalk. What do you want to do in Atlantic County? What is there in Atlantic County to do? There's no industry. You're not making anything. If it is, it's small here and there. Or you're in the service. You're doing the air conditioning. You're heating, plumbing. Your normal things. I learned all those things growing up in my life. Every area. After I moved out of Pennsylvania, after I moved out of New Jersey, I learned those things. And I didn't grow up learning those things. Growing up, my work, I was working at Cumberland Farms, worked for Sears doing the sign shop, making signs for Sears. They had the manual press. You had to put all the letters in there together, slap the ink on there, put the paper on there, roll the press apart, and you got one sign. I was doing early sign making back before it was a thing. Before computers. I had to put up the signs for the Sears and Mays Landing because it would change daily. The price would change. I had to go mark the prices down. I need this, this, and this. And the sign shop was always needing new sign requisitions. So I was in high school working at Sears as my co-op, learning how to make signs that would have to be seen throughout the whole store. I learned early on certain skills. Making the sign look right, make it look professional, make it look like a quality store, make sure, presenting a plan that Sears had to the people would run through my department, and then we'd be responsible for putting those signs up there that used to be hanging by your clothes when you go shopping at the Sears or the hardware, whatever it was. I was the guy that had to make part of the signs. That was my employee during high school. Casinos wasn't doing it for me. I didn't have an interest. I was working at Two Brothers when before I moved to Pennsylvania. Where was I at 21? 21 years old, I was living with my mom. I was working at Two Brothers at my second time. I was fired the first time. I came back to Two Brothers. fired when I was like 15, before I was legally able to work because I wouldn't cut onions. And they fired me because the onions at Two Brothers would have to be cut in the corner of the restaurant in the front, right by the 500-degree oven in the heat of summer with no air, no wind. In the corner, cutting, we're using a slicer by hand. I had to cut a barrel, 5-gallon pail of onions, like once or twice a week because we go through them that much. And it just burned so much all the time. I was like, I don't want to do it this week. I just want a week off. Just give me a break. And John was like, nope, you got to do it or you're fired. He fired me. 2 years later, they came back. A couple years later, I came back as their first delivery person, delivering a pizza for Two Brothers. I began their delivery system in Two Brothers when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, somewhere around there, working as a first ever delivery person. It's a big thing for me. It was a big first for them. I'd known Two Brothers as I'm a delivery person, and I'm the guy that my pizza place around the corner from my house, who hired me when I was underage to work at the sub shop and pizza shop, learning skills early on in life. And they asked me to come back to be the first delivery person, and that was big for me. The trust that somebody had to me to take their pizza from that store, no internet, you calling for an order, you're coming to handwriting. Hi, your name is what? Yes, and your address is 604 Old Street Road, Fisherville, New Jersey, whatever. And we want to take that order over the phone, make it, and I'm going to go deliver it to their house. And this was before maps, this was before GPS, this was before any of that stuff. But I figured it out. They asked me to help them do it, I did it. We'll have you deliver it. Okay, we're going to get a map. I got a map of the county, circle the 0 radius, that's where we're going to deliver it to. I helped set that up. I helped work out the kinks early on. They trusted me enough to help them, and they employed me to do so. I'm thankful. I love opening up the door to new opportunities and seeing what could happen. Now, that's at 21. Before that, my sister and I, we fought. We would fight like cats and dogs. My sister was always a contention growing up. We never learned how to get along nicely as children, and it shows to today. And my sister's the only one who doesn't want to change. Oh God, growing up, man, we were torturous of each other. It was like there was no holds barred. Whatever we wanted to do, we would beat the shit out of each other, yell and fight, and kick and punch. But where I learned that from? I got beaten as 7 years old. What do I know? I didn't carry on into my adulthood. Nobody can ever say I'll ever hit them or beat them or hurt them. People that know me know I helped them my whole life. So what me and my sister did in my mom's home never resonated outside of that. It stayed there. My history stayed where it was my whole life. I never came at my mom. I love her for what she's done for me. I love her for being strong enough to be in a situation and get herself out of it, and that I was there with her getting herself out. My mom became a healer, and she was on TV as a local celebrity. No one could ever say that my relationship with my mom was volatile, angry, hostile, anything like that. My mom was a loving woman. She accepted the responsibility of what she did for me. She didn't have to say it. We didn't have to go to therapy. We didn't have to talk to a doctor. We didn't have to go. None of when it happened, it ended that day. Without any thoughts of the latter. I'm saying it because a certain woman, Tekla Sola, swears that I have mother issues, but she's not authoritarian. She's just a woman with mental issues. So I should have just started this off by my 20s first. Or I should have started off this segment with what I learned until I was 21, but then up to 36 or 30, or no, 30. Well, I met her, I guess, when I was 36 when I met Josh, so 35. I was 34. So I should probably be discussing what happened from birth to 34, because how could a woman so unaware or unknowledgeable about who I am get me so wrong that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has charges against me today based on her lies? Well, how do we get there? So I was trying to focus on what happened from birth to 34, 35 till I met her, because after I met her, she has a totally different view of who I am, because she doesn't know who I am. So this woman who's unaware of my training of dealing with mentally disturbed women was there when I met her. My training on how to deal with lunatic women began years ago. Meeting Tess Sola. And why am I phrasing it in this way? I phrase it in this way because a certain woman thought she was going to be taking advantage of somebody who seemed to be somebody who was very happy and forgiving and loving and generous. And she thought she was going to take advantage of this. That's what's so funny. That's why I'm talking about this. And saying it this close to the camera now, because she painted a picture of me as being weak, mentally disturbed, unchallengeable. She's presented to me as herself as a bully with no regards of human life, who now has the backing of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to her quiver, who has opened herself up to a whole entire scandal that rocks the county of Pennsylvania, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to this day, because of a lie that was told by a woman who has a mental abuse, who has been mentally insane for 20 years, and who has infiltrated like a Trojan horse, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who has backed her. Because my ability to forgive and have understanding should be thought of as a weakness, is what she has coined me as, but not something that I am. So somebody can say that I am weak or appearing to be vulnerable or unwilling to. I'm not sure what she said. So many damn things that were lies. I'm not here to talk about her lies. I'm talking about the years it's taken me, or the years I've forgiven a woman who tried to kill my kid. And tried getting away with it, and then never speaking about it, and then pretending it never happened, that my son almost died. That I was robbed of protecting him. I was robbed because she couldn't protect him first. She protected herself first by not calling 911. She wasn't going to protect my kid first. She was protecting herself. Not calling 911 that day before she was getting a job with the county. Just before she gets a job with the county, or maybe she already did, I don't know. A report shows up that's dated 8/23/2003 that my son almost died. Now, did that happen? No. Did what I see on paper happen? No. Because the past 16 years I've been calling child services and asking them to investigate what I found on a piece of paper that should have been in front of a ambulance ride to the hospital, to knowing how much damage is in the brain of an infant child who has suffered the biggest traumatic event of his life at such an early stage of his life that we have no marker. We have no picture of the brain. We have no validation of an MRI or CAT scan to know how much damage was done. We have no idea what the aftercare of that was. As a post-trauma protocol that happens to a child's brain that's supposed to be adhered to. We don't know any of those things. We don't know how much pressure was put on the brain, but we know that there was some sort of damage there. There is residual damage from the brain, from that scarring in there, and that's been the thorn in the side of the county for 15 years, because they failed to investigate when I called for child abuse about what happened to my son, and I found out with Matt, and I called child services and I begged them to come investigate what happened here, and why is my son acting up in school for the past 5 years? Why is he acting up? Why is he getting kicked out? Why is he being punished? Why is he getting kicked out of home daycare? That the woman said, I can't have your kid here no more in this home daycare because your child is too out of control. And you get kicked out of a home daycare and it's a regular daycare, and then you start to get kicked out of a daycare, the regular daycare system, and then the next daycare, and then the school system, and then the school threatens to take out your kid. There's a fucking problem. See, I don't have a problem with Test Solar or the system. My problem is that my job is to protect my kid and get him a test. That's it. My job is to get my son the appropriate medical health care for a citizen of this here United States of America who has rights to be treated in the way that we're responsible for medically treated terms of this time and this age and that time and that age and that day that happened. That child had a right to be seen and treated appropriately because he's my kid. She denied all of that. On purpose, with intent to do harm and to get away with it. So that we could be here, so I can be here this day making this report on camera once again. The multiple times that I've talked to the county and made the complaints all up and down, from the Attorney General all the way down to the police. I've made reports. I have official documentation of me making reports to these people for over the 15 years that the first one never got phone call back on. The first original call, when I said I saw this paper, I said, listen, my son's been abused. Here's what's going on. Here's what I found. He almost died. And I'm calling I'm calling the child abuse hotline because I suspect child abuse. And here's my paper. I'm saying this is what we found out. This is what wasn't done. This is how she covered up this. And I said, this is the beginning of multiple things that's happened with this child. Here's all this. Here's how he was kicked out of daycare. He was kicked out of this. He was being misdiagnosed because she would change her mind whenever she wanted to. So I'm calling and saying, listen, my kid he almost died this one day. I have his paper, but in CHOP, when they were investigating ADHD for his mental issues, the woman illegally takes him to CHOP against court order or court papers, and she doesn't talk about his first concussion to somebody who's investigating his mental issues. So the concussion that never happened doesn't go on to CHOP, recorded by her, because she failed to take this information about his near death and pass it on to Chop so he can have the right future. So he was sabotaged here, and then 6 years later to here, he was abused. And here's just me calling the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and telling them, listen, this is all I have. This is what I know. This is what's been transpiring. I need to sit down with somebody and talk about the abuse that's happened to my kid. So I call the hotline because that's what the Commonwealth asks you to do. And I do that. And they said, fuck you. In 2007. That paper I found broke up my life. When I realized that at that point in time in 2007, that my kid almost died just a few years before, and then not only that, but he wasn't properly you forgo. She forwent the proper treatment and care of a child with a concussion, and he never received the medical treatment required for an infant or any human at that time to be treated with the care of MRI CAT scan. This was 2003 when this happened. He was denied that, and then he was denied after that. It never happened. So either A, that paper didn't happen, but the paper happened. I confronted the pediatrician. But let's just look. I'm sitting at the table and I request, because of all this chaos that's going on with this woman, that's going on through courts, through school, there was nothing this woman had a problem with. She had a problem with everybody, everything. I'm not the problem. She had a problem with getting him dressed, getting him to school, arguing and fighting, and she was manic out the wazoo. Manic in such a dangerous way. The dangers of the concussion, I'm going to talk about that when I come back, because I've used the restroom and I don't know how to hit pause, so I don't know how to do that with this thing. So the traumatic events that happen that follow him is something that you can't pretend that it didn't happen and hope for the best. You can't change the outcome because you say so. And when this woman's been doing this with this child and myself for many, many, many years, she's learned how to get better at it to help she knows how to get the county on her side. She takes bad information and they drink it, and now the county has now been in bed with this child abuser. Because once I made the phone call to beg the county to help me help my son and get him the help that he needed back in 2007 when they said, fuck you, they never called back. One job to do. One singular, the sole purpose of the child abuse hotline is to take calls and get the children help. That's the job of the child abuse hotline. I learned so much about how that whole system works. They hire people who are not qualified, who are able to go and take the calls and fill in the computers and to not know what child abuse looks like, but to help. In the words of some of the other people I've been in touch with over 15 years, they're here to help. But little do they know that these volunteers or these people who get paid by the county to answer the phone calls for the child abuse hotline, wherever they're doing it from, there's a recording of my call. My very first call with the Commonwealth. It never goes away. There is a digital tracking of that phone call in 2007 that was kept on file by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They keep everything, bro. So to my defense, to this day, why I'm here, there is a report that I made in 2007 that said that my son almost died, and this woman covered it up, lied about it, and then never was able to tell the truth to this day. And this is the 2007 when I'm making a call, say, look, these things that are happening aren't coming up on current things, are missing. There's things that are wrong. There's wrong information. And I said, she works for Judge Alan Rubenstein. She works directly for Alan Rubenstein. And she works for the courts. So I'm leading off with all of these markers, these flags that normally would have gone in the system as the order taker is taking the calls and saying, okay, she works for Judge Rubenstein. She's a official court reporter for Bucks County. She's a federal employee. She's a federally protected employee, and you're getting a phone call about a woman who works for the system, and I don't get here's your confirmation number of your call. 2007. I don't get a confirmation of my phone call. I don't get an email. I don't get anything that says that phone call was made, but it was made. I was on the phone. There was a phone call from my phone number to the 1-800 number that was logged in the system. You're tracking from my phone call, which I have my phone records from that year, and a phone call was made, and I have the digital output. The phone call was made for the duration of this much time. I have that in writing, that I made a phone call to the official number for child abuse hotline in 2007. The physical phone call was made. It says it on the paperwork. Then somebody picks up the phone, and then on my phone records it says duration of phone call. Okay. So that I have that as proof. What they don't have is a phone call back, an email, phone call, and nothing back. 2007 now, when Facebook's began. A record is created about my abuse, about my son's abuse, and not a phone call back. Pause. Bathroom.